Admiral Keth'var of the Zentorian Imperial Navy stood at the observation deck of the Galactic Military Academy, his forearms crossed in what any civilized being would recognize as supreme irritation. The morning light filtering through the Academy's bioluminescent dome cast an eerie glow across his purple, chitinous features, but nothing could brighten his mood today. Today he had to deal with humans. Commander Vel'Thar, he barked to his assistant, a nervous Quillen whose tentacles twitched with each syllable. Remind me again why the Galactic Council thought it was a brilliant idea to include these DeathWorlders in our prestigious academy? Vel'Thar's translator crackled as he responded, Sir, the Terran Republic's membership in the Galactic Federation requires equal access to military training facilities. The humans have been quite insistent about proving their worth. Keth'var's mandibles clicked in what passed for a snort among his species. Proving their worth? These primitive ape descendants who discovered fire only yesterday in galactic terms? They can barely comprehend quantum mechanics, let alone advanced military strategy. Their homeworld is so barbarically dangerous that most civilized species require environmental suits just to survive there for more than a few minutes. The observation deck overlooked the Academy's premier testing facility, a sprawling complex of reinforced transparent aluminum walls and energy barriers. At the center sat the Vorthak containment unit, a massive chamber that housed the most dangerous creature the galaxy had to offer for combat training. The Vorthak, native to the DeathWorld Mortis Prime, was a perfect killing machine, standing 12 feet tall with razor-sharp claws, acidic saliva, and intelligence that rivaled most sentient species. It had been specifically selected to test the mettle of only the most advanced military cadets. Sir. Vel'Thar's voice quavered slightly. Perhaps we should reconsider using the Vorthak for the human cadets. Their species lacks the advanced weaponry and tactical implants that our other students possess. The creature has it has never failed to eliminate every test subject within the first 2 minutes. Keth'var's laugh was a harsh, chittering sound that made several nearby Quillen technicians flinch. Precisely my point, Commander. These humans need to learn their place in the galactic hierarchy. They strut around with their primitive projectile weapons and their laughably basic technology, acting as if they belong among the truly advanced civilizations. The Vorthak will provide them with a much-needed lesson in humility. He gestured with 2 of his arms toward the testing chamber below. Look at this facility. Vel'Thar. Quantum energy barriers, molecular disruptors, gravitational field manipulators. Every piece of equipment here represents millions of years of evolutionary advancement. The Korthani developed plasma weaponry before humans even discovered agriculture. The Nexari were manipulating space-time while these DeathWorlders were still banging rocks. Together. The Admiral's compound eyes glittered with malicious anticipation. When word spreads throughout the galaxy that every human cadet was eliminated by our standard combat assessment, it will send a clear message. The Terran Republic can keep their precious Federation membership, but they will never be considered equals among the truly civilized species. Vel'Thar shifted uncomfortably, his tentacles writhing with obvious distress. Admiral, sir, what if the humans lodge a formal complaint with the Galactic Council? They might claim the test was unfairly designed. Keth'var waved dismissively with his lower arms while his upper ones remained crossed. Let them complain. The Vorthak is a standard assessment tool, used for centuries to evaluate military potential. If they cannot handle a simple combat scenario, then they have no business in our academy. Besides, his mandibles spread in what might have been a grin. Dead cadets file very few complaints. The morning announcement chimed through the facility's speakers, echoing off the metallic walls with crystalline clarity. All cadets report to Combat Assessment Level 7. Today's evaluation will commence in 30 minutes. Keth'var's satisfaction was palpable as he watched the various alien species converging on the testing floor below. Tall, elegant Korthani with their plasma rifles, heavily armored Nexari with their gravity hammers, and sleek Vrixan with their molecular blade arrays. All of them were properly equipped, properly trained, and properly evolved for this moment. And then there were the humans. Keth'var's attention immediately focused on the most ridiculous sight he had witnessed in his 2 centuries of military service. A human female, barely reaching the chest height of the smallest Quillan cadet, and was shuffling across the polished floor wearing what appeared to be standard-issue Academy fatigues that somehow looked like sleepwear on her compact frame. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy arrangement that defied all military regulations, and most shocking of all, she was yawning. By the 7 moons of Zentaur, Keth'var muttered, his translator barely catching the profanity, is that creature actually falling asleep before a combat assessment? The human cadet, according to his datapad, was identified as Maya Torres, age 22 standard galactic years, from the Terran colony of New Brisbane. Her service record was embarrassingly brief, consisting mainly of basic training scores that would have been considered mediocre even by human standards. She carried no visible weapons beyond a standard-issue utility knife and what appeared to be a small bag of primitive tools that belonged in a museum rather than a military academy. Commander Keth'var called out, his voice dripping with disdain, observed the human's preparation for mortal combat. She appears to be treating this assessment as an inconvenient interruption to her nap schedule. Maya Torres had indeed stopped walking and was now stretching her arms above her head, letting out another jaw-cracking yawn that seemed to last for an eternity. The other cadets gave her a wide berth, not out of respect or fear, but out of what appeared to be genuine confusion about her behavior. Young Korthani cadet, his plasma rifle charging with nervous energy, whispered something to his Nexari companion that Keth'var's enhanced hearing picked up clearly. Is the DeathWorlder experiencing some form of neurological malfunction? She seems completely unaware of the danger we are about to face. The Nexari, whose gravitational field generators were already humming with defensive preparations, shook his massive head. Perhaps this is how their species processes fear? I have heard that humans exhibit strange behaviors when confronted with superior opponents. Keth'var's mandibles clicked with amusement. Look at her, he thought, barely 5.5 feet tall, probably weighing less than a Quillan tentacle, standing there like she is waiting for public transportation rather than preparing to face a creature that has killed trained warriors from across the galaxy. Her skin was that peculiar pink-brown color that humans seemed to think was attractive, completely lacking the protective scales chitin, either energy fields that any sensible evolutionary path would have developed. Notice her equipment, Velthar, Keth'var continued his commentary. No plasma weaponry, no molecular disruptors, no gravitational manipulators. She has brought what appears to be a collection of primitive metal implements and some sort of fibrous material. I believe humans call it rope, though I cannot fathom what she intends to accomplish with such archaic tools. Maya Torres chose that moment to sit down cross-legged on the floor, completely ignoring the growing tension around her. She pulled out what looked like a nutrition bar and began eating it with the same casual indifference she might show while watching entertainment broadcasts. Several alien cadets stopped their preparations entirely, staring at her with a mixture of horror and fascination. Sir Velthar's tentacles were now writhing with visible distress. Should we inform the human that the assessment is about to begin? She seems unaware of the gravity of the situation. Keth'var's 4 eyes gleamed with malicious anticipation. Oh no, Commander. Let the DeathWorlder continue her little picnic. I want to savor every moment of what comes next. The facility's warning klaxons began their haunting wail, echoing through the chamber like the death songs of 1,000 civilizations. Red warning lights bathed the entire testing area in an ominous crimson glow, and the massive blast doors at the far end of the arena began their slow, grinding descent. Every cadet except Maya Torres immediately snapped to attention, weapons raised, defensive systems activated. Attention all cadets. The facility's artificial intelligence announced in perfectly modulated tones, the Vorthak specimen is being released. You have 15 minutes to demonstrate your tactical capabilities. Failure to neutralize the threat will result in immediate termination of your academy enrollment. Keth'var leaned forward eagerly. The AI had such a wonderful sense of humor about what constituted termination of enrollment. most cadets never lived long enough to worry about their academic standing. The containment field flickered and died with a sound like reality tearing. What emerged from the shadows beyond the blast doors was a nightmare-given form, a perfect killing machine shaped by millions of years of evolution on a world where only the most ruthless survived. The Vorthak stood 12 feet tall, its obsidian-black carapace gleaming wetly under the facility's harsh lights. 6 legs carried its massive bulk with disturbing grace, while its elongated head swept back and forth, tasting the air with organs that could detect fear pheromones from half a mile away. Its mouth opened, revealing rows of teeth that dripped with acidic saliva capable of dissolving most known armor composites. But the most terrifying feature was its eyes, multifaceted orbs that processed information faster than most military computers, calculating attack vectors and defensive weaknesses with the cold efficiency of a natural-born predator. The Korthani cadet was the first to engage, his plasma rifle whining to full charge as he took aim at the creature's center mass. The bolt of superheated energy lanced across the arena, striking the Vorthak directly in the chest. For a moment, Keth'var thought the assessment might be over before it truly began. Then the creature's carapace simply absorbed the plasma blast, its surface rippling like liquid metal before returning to its original form. The Vorthak's head turned toward the Korthani with what might have been amusement, and then it moved. The speed was impossible. One moment the creature was standing at the far end of the arena, the next it was covering the distance in bounds that defied physics. The Korthani managed to fire 3 more shots before the Vorthak's claws found him, sending him flying across the chamber to impact the far wall with a sickening crunch. The elimination field activated instantly, teleporting the unconscious cadet to the medical bay. Fascinating, Maya Torres said from her position on the floor, apparently watching the carnage with the same interest she might show a mildly entertaining documentary. She took another bite of her nutrition bar. The Nixari was next, his massive gravity hammer crackling with energy fields that could crush diamond into powder. He swung with the force of a small moon, the weapon's gravitational distortion field warping space around the creature's head. The Vorthak caught the hammer in one clawed hand, its arm not even trembling under the tremendous force. With casual indifference, it tossed both weapon and wielder aside like discarded toys. Interesting technique, Maya commented to no one in particular, still chewing thoughtfully. Wrong application, though. Keth'var's mandibles ground together in frustration. What was wrong with this human? 2 of the galaxy's most advanced warriors had just been eliminated by a creature that could tear apart starship hulls with its bare claws, and she was providing commentary like a sports broadcaster. The remaining cadets launched a coordinated assault, their various energy weapons, molecular disruptors, and gravitational fields creating a light show that would have been impressive at any other time. The Vorthak moved through their attacks like a dancer, its movements fluid and precise. Within minutes, the arena was empty except for the creature and the infuriatingly calm human. Maya Torres finished her nutrition bar, crumpled the wrapper, and tucked it into her pocket with the sort of casual environmental consciousness that made Keth'var want to scream. She stood up slowly, brushing imaginary dust from her uniform, and let out another massive yawn that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. "Well," she said, her voice carrying clearly in the arena's acoustics, "I guess it's my turn now." The Vorthak's multifaceted eyes fixed on her with the intensity of a targeting computer, its head tilting slightly as if trying to understand what it was looking at. This tiny creature showed none of the fear pheromones that usually drove it into a killing frenzy. Instead, there was something else in her scent, something that made the apex predator pause for the first time in its existence. Maya Torres cracked her knuckles, rolled her shoulders, and smiled. 40 seconds, she said conversationally, as if speaking to an old friend. That should be more than enough. What happened next would haunt Keth'var's dreams for the rest of his considerably long life. The transformation was so sudden, so complete, that for a moment the Admiral wondered if the human had been replaced by some sort of shape-shifting infiltrator. 1 second Maya Torres was the sleepy, casual cadet who treated mortal combat like an inconvenience. The next second she was something else entirely. Her posture changed first. The slouched, relaxed stance vanished, replaced by a predator's crouch that made the Vorthak's own hunting posture look clumsy by comparison. Her eyes, which had been half closed with apparent boredom, suddenly snapped wide open with a focus so intense that Keth'var could feel it from the observation deck. This was not the gaze of prey looking at a predator. This was the gaze of an apex predator recognizing a worthy opponent. "Timer starts now," Maya said, her voice no longer casual but carrying an edge that could cut through neutronium. The Vorthak, sensing the change, immediately launched itself forward with the same devastating speed that had eliminated the other cadets. Its claws extended, acidic saliva streaming behind it like a toxic banner, multifaceted eyes calculating the optimal kill trajectory for this small, apparently defenseless target. Maya Torres took one step to the right. It was not a dodge, not an evasion, not any maneuver that appeared in any military manual across the galaxy. It was simply one step, perfectly timed, that caused 12 feet of engineered death to sail harmlessly past her left shoulder. The Vorthak's claws missed her by inches, close enough that the displaced air ruffled her messy hair. 15 seconds, Maya announced calmly, as if providing a sports commentary. The creature landed hard, its 6 legs gouging furrows in the reinforced flooring as it spun around with impossible speed. Flickered across its alien features. In its experience, prey either fled in terror or stood frozen in fear. They did not step casually aside as if avoiding a puddle on the sidewalk. Maya had already moved to her equipment bag, her hands working with mechanical precision. She pulled out what appeared to be an ordinary length of rope, the kind that primitive civilizations might use for hauling cargo or securing primitive watercraft. Keth'var's mandibles clicked with confused disdain. What did she intend to accomplish with plant fibers against a creature that could shred starship armor? The Vorthak charged again, this time approaching from a different angle, its predatory intelligence adapting to what it perceived as Maya's lucky first dodge. Its movements were a symphony of evolutionary perfection, each step calculated for maximum efficiency and killing potential. Maya Torres began to spin the rope. "What in the name of the Great Spiral is she doing?" Keth'var whispered, his tentacles writhing with nervous energy. Keth'var had no answer. The human was creating what appeared to be a loop in the rope, spinning it above her head like some sort of primitive ritual dance. The motion looked completely random, utterly without tactical value, and entirely suicidal when facing a creature designed to kill. 25 seconds, Maya called out, apparently keeping her own count. The Vorthak leaped, its trajectory perfect, its claws extended for a killing blow that would end this bizarre encounter. Maya Torres threw her rope. The loop sailed through the air with an accuracy that defied mathematics. It settled around the creature's elongated head just as its front claws reached the point where Maya had been standing. But Maya Torres was no longer there. She had rolled backward, grabbed something else from her bag, and was already moving to her next position while the Vorthak found itself suddenly jerked off course by the rope now wrapped around its neck. 30 seconds, Maya announced, her voice still infuriatingly calm. The creature landed awkwardly, thrashing against the rope with enough force to snap most known materials. But human rope, as Keth'var was learning, was apparently made of more than just plant fibers. It was made of generations of survival instinct, of species that had learned to trap creatures far larger and more dangerous than themselves using nothing but intelligence and stubbornness. Maya had produced what looked like a primitive hammer from her equipment bag, the kind of tool that civilized species had abandoned millions of years ago in favor of molecular manipulators and energy shapers. She sprinted toward the struggling Vorthak, which was now tangled in the rope and growing increasingly frantic as its usual killing methods proved ineffective against this bizarre assault. The creature's acidic saliva began eating through the rope, but Maya had apparently anticipated this. She reached the Vorthak just as the fibers began to dissolve, raised her primitive hammer and struck the creature's left front leg joint with surgical precision. The sound was like a gunshot echoing through the arena. The Vorthak's leg buckled, its perfect balance destroyed by what should have been an insignificant impact from a primitive tool. But Maya Torres had struck at exactly the right angle, at exactly the right moment, targeting the one vulnerable point in the creature's otherwise impenetrable armor. "How did she know?" Keth'var whispered, his voice barely audible above the creature's roars of pain and frustration. Maya was already moving again, her hammer striking a second leg joint, then a third. Each blow was perfectly placed, perfectly timed, targeting weaknesses that no scanner had ever detected, that no tactical computer had ever calculated. She was reading the creature's anatomy like a book written in a language that only humans seemed to understand. The Vorthak, now crippled and unable to use its primary advantage of speed and mobility, attempted to grab Maya with its remaining functional limbs. She danced around its increasingly desperate attacks with an ease that made the creature's earlier display of speed look clumsy by comparison. 38 seconds, Maya called out cheerfully, as if she were counting down to a pleasant surprise rather than the destruction of a galactic apex predator. With clinical efficiency, she struck the creature's remaining mobile joints, each impact precisely calibrated to disable rather than kill. The Vorthak, now completely immobilized but still very much alive, could only watch as Maya Torres approached its head with her primitive hammer raised. 39 seconds, she said, looking directly into the creature's multifaceted eyes with something that might have been sympathy. The final blow was delivered to a spot behind the creature's left eye cluster, a point that no advanced scanning technology had ever identified as significant. The Vorthak's entire body went limp instantly, not dead but unconscious, defeated by a technique that predated most galactic civilizations. Maya Torres stepped back, tucked her hammer into her equipment bag, and dusted off her hands with the satisfaction of a job well done. 40 seconds, she announced to the stunned silence of the observation deck. Then, as if remembering something important, she let out another enormous yawn that seemed to echo through the entire facility. "Well," she said conversationally, looking up at the observation windows where Keth'var and his staff stood frozen in shock, "that was a nice warm-up. What's next?" The silence that followed Maya's question was so profound that Keth'var could hear his own circulatory system pumping hemolymph through his four-chambered heart. His compound eyes, which had witnessed the rise and fall of stellar empires, had just observed something that violated every principle of tactical engagement he had learned in his 2 centuries of military service. "Commander Velthar," he said slowly, his voice barely above a whisper, "please tell me that our recording systems malfunctioned." Velthar's tentacles were trembling so violently that his translator was having difficulty processing his speech. "Sir, all systems are functioning normally. The human cadet has successfully neutralized the Vorthak specimen in precisely 40 seconds using primitive tools and no energy weapons." Down in the arena was Stahl. Maya Torres had wandered over to the unconscious Vorthak and was examining it with the casual interest of someone inspecting a particularly interesting rock formation. She prodded one of its disabled legs with her boot, nodded thoughtfully, and then looked up at the observation deck again. "Hey," she called out, her voice carrying easily through the arena's acoustics, "do you guys want me to explain what just happened? Because I can see the confusion from here, and honestly, it's making me a little uncomfortable." Keth'var's mandibles worked soundlessly for several seconds before he managed to activate the communication system. "Cadet Torres," he said, his voice strained with the effort of maintaining professional composure, "please report to the observation deck immediately for debriefing." "Sure thing, Admiral," Maya replied cheerfully, apparently having identified his rank insignia from a distance that should have made such recognition impossible. "Just give me a second to pack up my gear." As Maya collected her primitive tools with the same casual efficiency she had displayed throughout the encounter, Keth'var found himself questioning fundamental assumptions about the nature of civilization itself. The Vorthak represented the pinnacle of evolutionary development, a creature so perfectly adapted for killing that it had never encountered a prey species it could not defeat. Yet this small human had neutralized it with tools that belonged in a museum of primitive technology. "Admiral," Velthar ventured hesitantly, "perhaps we should contact the Galactic Council immediately." This incident may require a complete reassessment of human capabilities. Before Keth'var could respond, Maya Torres entered the observation deck with the same casual demeanor she had maintained throughout the entire encounter. She looked around the room, taking in the shocked expressions of the assembled alien officers, and nodded politely to each of them. "So," she said, settling into a chair that was designed for beings twice her size, "I'm guessing you want to know how a primitive DeathWorlder with Stone Age tools just took down your supposedly unbeatable apex predator?" "The question had occurred to us," Keth'var replied dryly, surprised to find his sense of humor intact despite having his entire worldview demolished. Maya grinned, and for the first time since the encounter began, Keth'var saw something in her expression that reminded him she was, indeed, a member of a species that had evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill everything else. "Right, well, the thing is," she began, her tone shifting to something that might have been used to explain a simple concept to a child. "You guys have been thinking about this all wrong. You see the Vorthak as this perfect killing machine, and sure, it's impressive. 12 feet tall, armored carapace, acidic saliva, the works. But you're thinking like engineers instead of like prey." She leaned forward, her expression becoming more animated. "See, humans have been prey for most of our evolutionary history. We got good at two things: running away from things that wanted to eat us, and figuring out how to kill things that were bigger and stronger than us. That Vorthak? On my homeworld we call that Tuesday." "But your tools," Velthar interjected, his tentacles still twitching with nervous energy, "they are so primitive, so simple. How could they be effective against advanced biological armor?" Maya's laugh was genuinely amused rather than mocking. "That's exactly why they worked. Your plasma rifles, your gravity hammers, your molecular disruptors. They're all designed to overcome specific types of defenses. The Vorthak evolved to counter energy weapons and advanced technology. But a rope and a hammer, those are older than civilization itself. The creature had no evolutionary response to tools that predate its species by millions of years." Keth'var felt something that might have been respect beginning to replace his previous contempt. "You were analyzing its movements, identifying weaknesses that our scanners could not detect." "Pattern recognition," Maya nodded. "Every living thing moves in predictable ways based on its anatomy. The Vorthak's joints are protected by overlapping plates, but there's always a gap during articulation. Hit the right spot at the right time with the right force, and even the most advanced biological armor becomes irrelevant." The implications were staggering. If humans could neutralize the galaxy's most dangerous creatures using primitive tools and intuitive understanding, what did that say about the rest of galactic civilization's assumptions about technological superiority? "Maya Torres," Keth'var said slowly, "I believe we need to have a much longer conversation about human capabilities." But Maya yawned again, that same jaw-cracking yawn that had annoyed him so much earlier. Now, somehow, it seemed less like laziness and more like the casual confidence of a predator conserving energy between hunts. "Sure, Admiral," she said agreeably. "But can we grab some coffee first? I'm still pretty tired, and I have a feeling this is going to be a long discussion." 3 hours later, Keth'var sat alone in his office, staring at the incident report that would fundamentally alter the Galactic Federation's understanding of human capabilities. The words seemed inadequate to capture what he had witnessed. How a species he had dismissed as primitive had demonstrated tactical brilliance that surpassed centuries of military doctrine. Maya Torres had explained her actions with the same casual attitude she had shown throughout the entire encounter. To her, disabling a galactic apex predator was no more remarkable than swatting an annoying insect. She had dismissed his amazement with a shrug, mentioning that her younger brother could probably have done it faster, and then had wandered off to find the Academy's cafeteria. The Admiral's 4 hands moved across his report console, each keystroke feeling like a small admission of ignorance. How many other assumptions about human limitations were equally wrong? If they could neutralize the galaxy's most dangerous creatures with primitive tools and pattern recognition, what else might they be capable of? A soft chime indicated an incoming priority message from the Galactic Council. Word of the incident had already reached the highest levels of government, and requests for detailed analysis were flooding in from military commands across the galaxy. Everyone wanted to understand how the supposedly primitive humans had achieved the impossible. Keth'var allowed himself a small smile as he began composing his response. The Terran Republic had insisted that humans deserved equal treatment in galactic affairs, and he had spent years arguing against such presumption. Now, he found himself wondering if the galaxy was ready for true equality with a species that treated the impossible as merely inconvenient. In the distance, he could hear Maya Torres laughing at something in the cafeteria, probably sharing coffee with cadets who would spend the rest of their careers trying to understand what they had witnessed. Perhaps, Keth'var thought, it was time for the galaxy to start taking DeathWorlders seriously. After all, if they could do this while half asleep, what might they accomplish when they were actually paying attention?